Hello, good morning. We have Jessica Manucy here, and she is the head of talent at TruGreen. Uh, Jessica, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so we have a list of questions, and we're going to go through and we're going to get Jessica's take on a whole host of things: talent acquisition, career related, um, and I think she's going to have a really interesting perspective. So I'll start from the very beginning, and I love asking this question to people who are involved in recruitment because I know for me it is a kind of a funny story, and I think it is with a lot of us. How did you get started in recruitment?
Um, so actually my first career was in the restaurant business.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to Florida State University. I got my degree in hospitality administration. I wanted to be in the restaurant business. I'm not really sure why. Um, no one in my family's in the restaurant business or anything like that. And I worked in restaurants for the first 4 years of my career, and then I kind of woke up one day and said, I knew I wanted to, have a family, and I just was like, this business is not really conducive to, the lifestyle I wanted. So I was like, well, what else do I want to do? Because I never really wanted to do anything else.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I actually took a bunch of assessments. I read this book called I Don't Know What I Want, but I Know It's Not This, and
Oh, interesting.
started started doing a bunch of like self-reflection, and that's really what led me to human resources and people. It was like all the things that I loved about the restaurant business were all the people aspects. And
Yeah.
so it was like, well, this, you probably be really good in human resources. Um, so I decided to go that route. And then the first person that would hire me was a staffing company. So I went from the restaurant business to being an ops manager at a staffing company, doing light industrial staffing and like CDL drivers, those kinds of things. So that was really my first start in recruiting. And
Yeah.
from there, I took on an HR role after that, and then realized uh, it was kind of that rough time of between 2008 and 2013 where we were taking benefits away from people and
Yeah.
cutting people's hours and things like that. And I was like, I don't really want to be in HR. Like I like the recruiting part because that's the fun part of HR, I think.
Yeah.
So I actually went to work for a startup company where I got to hire a lot of people, and something just kind of clicked in my brain where it was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. Like, I
Yeah.
love the aspect of selling people on this job and hunting for people. I loved that
Yeah.
part of it. So having to be resourceful and, having to have a bunch of balls in the air at the same time. I loved all of that. So
Yeah. It's funny,
yeah.
it's like everybody who's in recruitment, we kind of fall into it. And like the story is, well, how did you fall into it? Right. And how did you
Yeah. Yeah,
um
nobody goes to school going, "Oh, I really want to be in recruiting." Like that isn't even a thing that's on most people's radar.
yeah, I didn't even
Um,
know it was a job, which is
I
funny
didn't
because I now
either.
I have a whole YouTube channel about recruitment, but like
Right.
coming out of college, I had no idea. I had to like Google it after someone called me for an interview. I was like, what is this?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Exactly.
yeah. Well, good. Well, so you found your passion for recruitment. One of the things I like asking people because I just think it's a fun question is like, do you have a go-to interview question? Like, do you have a favorite? What is it? And then how did you come across it?
Um, I don't have a favorite in terms of like, I like to try to trip people up, or I like to ask about, if you were on a desert island and who
Yeah.
would you break, like anything like that. My favorite question to ask people is like the first question that usually ask everybody is, um, you know, I usually say, I have your resume in front of me. I've already looked at it, but I'd like to know what you think is important on here. Give me your 5 minute
Mm,
like elevator pitch. Like tell me about yourself. What are the
yeah.
things that aren't on your resume that you think are important? They could be personal, they could be professional. I really basically want to know about you.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's always very telling what people want to tell you that maybe
Yeah.
isn't on the resume, right? So we can all look at a resume and say, yeah, can this person do this job? Um, but really it's the things that aren't listed on the resume, I think, that are more important, because really as talent acquisition professionals, we're making a judgment call. Like, is this somebody we want to work around? Is this somebody that's going to stay with our company and long term, and you really you can't get all of that from a piece of paper usually. So
Right.
that's kind of my go-to. Yeah.
Okay. I made a YouTube video. One of my YouTube videos is how to get hired in 6 minutes. And that video is just about the first 3 minutes of an interview and the last 3 minutes of an interview, because they're disproportionately proven to have a higher impact on whether or not someone has a higher impression of you, like when you leave the process. And one of the things I talk about is how to answer that question, because it is going to come up like, tell me about yourself in some fashion. You're going to get a version of that. And it's really important to maximize that first impression. So it's so interesting that you say that, because I do feel like, hey, that's like really important time as far as an interview goes.
I think that first impression is key, honestly. I mean, I typically will make a judgment call on somebody within that first, few minutes.
Most people
what
do,
they're
I feel
telling
like.
me. And then it's like rare that somebody can turn it around. And if I don't have a good, first impression, if I'm like, oh, this isn't going to be who we need, it's probably only been a handful of times in 20 years of doing this that someone has actually turned it around and said, okay, well, maybe my first impression wasn't great, but now I'm gonna. Yeah,
I don't recall that either. Like, usually it's, you start on one journey and you're not going to deviate from that. It's either going to start off great or not as good. So hiring, right? Like, I live it, breathe it, eat it, sleep it. You do too. What do you consider to be one of the biggest struggles to hiring great people?
Well, I think, the last couple of years, it's been really a candidate market, right? So, I mean, they have so many choices. A lot of the hiring that I do is high volume. I mean, we need to fill a ton of positions across the country in a very short amount of time. And we don't necessarily need, a skill set, a specific skill set, right? So it's more, general labor or sales roles that we would be willing to teach people how to do it, or it's call centers, things like that. So really it's just a competitiveness over the last couple of years. I mean, it's just, and some markets are more challenging than others. I think, it's definitely market dependent on locations, and, sometimes it's people word of mouth, like maybe we had a bad manager at one point in a location, and that's gotten out, and people are like, oh, I don't, and people don't understand like how important it is to have a brand and a brand presence, and 100%. That, people do talk. So it's much harder to come back from something like that than it is, to start off just with everything, great, or going to a new market, right? So
100%. When a candidate has a bad experience with a company, they're going to tell 9 people. If they have a great experience with a company, they maybe will tell 1 or 2. So I couldn't agree more. That stuff matters. Candidate experience matters. And I've said in some of my videos, how they treat you as a candidate is going to tell you a lot about how they're going to treat you as an employee. Because if you have a bad experience as a candidate, it's not like they're going to hire you and all of a sudden be different people. They're still the same thing.
100%. It's so important. And candidates have so many choices. They can easily just go down the road and get paid the same. And it's really having to flip that mindset of, especially people that have been in the business for a really long time, managers sometimes, where they're, it used to be, oh, well, everybody needs a job and we can be very selective. It has flipped. I mean, it's really a candidate's market. So you have to be selling them as much as they're selling you, right? So,
yes, 100%. When I have clients who go, okay, Ben, what can we do to make our process better and hire great people? I mean, the lowest hanging fruit is make your process faster and make sure your managers are selling at every level. And I agree. I think it's really important. What is your outlook for 2024? So we're almost 2 months in. I think the last 3 years in recruiting has been as interesting as any 3-year period. As you look forward at the rest of the year, just from your vantage point, your industry, just your, frame of reference, what is your outlook on the remaining, 10 months?
I'm very positive this year. I mean, I'm generally a positive person anyway, but just looking at how things have opened up tremendously, I think 2022 is probably the weirdest year I've ever seen in recruiting, and probably a lot of people will tell you that. It was just such a strange year, and we were able to get staff that year, but it cost us a lot of money. And I think a lot of people will tell you that same story. I mean, we were spending exorbitant amounts of money just to get people in the door. I mean, I've seen people do just crazy things. I mean, I think McDonald's at one point was like, paying people just to fill out applications, things like that. I mean, I've seen some weird things advertised. And those are, a lot of our competitors are competing for that same hourly talent. So, 23 was better, and I think this year is even better, so I'm seeing not having to spend as much on advertising to get, the same candidate flow. I'm seeing, not needing as many, people to do the job. I've gotten to scale back my recruiter team a little bit. Where it used to take more people. And part of that is, improved technology and, improved things that we've done, with our process. But a big part of it is also that there's more people, looking, and there's, so we can afford to be a little more choosy as well, with who we're bringing in. So yeah, I'm very positive about 24. I feel like it's going to be a great year.
Yeah, good. Well, so from a candidate's perspective, let's just say you're giving advice to someone who is looking for a job in 2024. What recommendations would you have for them to put themselves in the best position to succeed, to get that dream job, or to make that move in their career? What advice would you give them?
I would say networking is extremely important. Sometimes it's about who you know, or being resourceful and reaching out to the right person. So because the market is so open, sometimes we get hundreds of applications for the same role, and it would be nearly impossible to call every single person, especially, at certain level roles. You're talking about having long conversations with hundreds of people. So how can you make yourself stand out on the resume? And also, is there anybody in your LinkedIn network that you could reach out to that, potentially has a connection, or, anybody in your personal network? I think, sometimes when people are resourceful and they reach out to me on LinkedIn, I think that's a great sign. I'm like, oh, okay, this person, obviously wants a job. I maybe don't even know them, but maybe they're connected to me in some way, or maybe they're not. Maybe they just did some research and they found, that I'm the head of TA, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to pass their info, because they're obviously very interested and they're being resourceful. So.
Yeah, that's good advice. I've always said networking is kind of like a seatbelt in a car. Like, you need your seatbelt when you get in a car crash, but you can't put it on as you get in a car crash. You need to have it on well before you actually need it. And that's the same with networking. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So if you're not networking, start. But if you think, okay, now I need a job, now I'll start networking, it's just so much more beneficial to have started before right now. So network is something I think we can all do at all times. I think there's a huge benefit to it. So I think that's great advice.
And I think sometimes candidates don't also realize how long it's going to take them to find a new role, especially at certain levels. Like, I feel like if they've maybe been at a job for a really long time and they've been out of the game for a long time, they haven't interviewed in a long time, I don't think people necessarily realize either, like, how, competitive it is and how long it takes to find something new, right? So anything you can do to set yourself up for success, especially from a networking standpoint, is really important.
Interviewing and the process and the tools, like, I just imagine if someone hadn't interviewed for a job in like 6 or 7 years, how different, like, the technology, the applicant flow, the tools available. I mean, it's that 6 years might as well have been 60 years. It's so different. So that's good
Yeah,
advice. And yeah, it's hard to just jump back in having not done it for a while. It's most people don't love interviewing to begin with, but you add in how fast things move, and I think
right.
that complicates it further. Um,
Absolutely.
you had told me when we had met for the first time and we had started talking about having this conversation at the point in your career where you had 3 kids under 3 and you were growing your career and you were in a really busy time, and there was a balancing act that you had to do. Can you tell me about that? I think that's a really important topic. I think it's really valuable, and I think it would be great for some other people who might be in similar circumstances to hear. I'd love to get your take on that and your advice.
Yeah. Um, I've always wanted a career and I've always wanted a family. Those are two things that are extremely important to me. And I think sometimes, especially women, I think sometimes will give up their career because they feel like they need to be home with their family. And I think that, I think that's extremely noble. I'm not, I think staying home is like one of the hardest jobs you could ever have. But that has never been in the cards for me. Like I have always, I grew up with, 2 working parents in my house, and that was the example that I had. And, my mom was a midwife, so she would, be out delivering babies. She'd be gone for sometimes a couple of days at a time. And so that's the example I grew up with. And, and I just think, as women, sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit. Um, and I think people should realize you can have everything. You can do everything. You can have a very successful career and have great children, and you just really have to, put the right people in place to help you. You have to know when to ask for help, and you have to find people you can trust to watch your kids or take them to activities if you need help with that. I'm very fortunate. I have a strong husband, partner, and I have, family around me now, but for a lot of years, we had moved away, and while I was, getting promoted into different roles, and my husband was also getting promoted into different roles, and a couple of, places we've moved, we've had no support system. Right.
Yeah,
So it's just, finding that right nanny or that right person, that right neighbor to like get your kids off the bus if you need help, or, um, you know, spend your time doing quality, not necessarily quantity.
yeah,
Um, I have someone that comes and cleans my house because I want to be able to spend time with my kids on the weekends. I don't want to spend time cleaning my house.
yeah,
And that's just like a little thing, right? But it saves me hours where I get to actually be with my children. So, um, and I think that having a strong role model, actually, especially women working in the house. My kids see that, and I have 2 daughters and a son, and my daughters, see that same, role model that I had, that same, you can have everything, you can balance it. And
yeah.
because I know they desire to have careers also, and so, and I think it's important for my son to see too, because I want him to, find a woman that is also a strong partner. So
Yeah. That's great. I think there are a lot of takeaways there. And so there's a lot of things you could pull from what you just said. But one of the things that I think for me that I think I resonate with a lot is um, I find that the limitations others place on you are kind of worthless. Your limits are not my limits, but the limits we place on ourselves can be very powerful. And what you did is you didn't place a limit on yourself. You said, no, I'm not going to limit what I feel I'm capable of. And I think that's really important for people to hear, just in general. Um, so I
yeah,
love,
and I think don't listen to what other people say either. Like what works
yeah,
for you and your family is what works for you and your family. Like,
yeah,
I think society places a lot of, you know, boundaries on us sometimes, or makes us think like, oh, I don't want people to know that I'm doing this or that, because, you have to throw all that away. Like just do what works for you.
yeah, preach.
It may not
Yeah,
work for someone else. That's great. That's their family and their kids. Like,
yeah,
you do what works for you.
yeah,
So
awesome. One last question. I love ending like this. What are
Yeah.
you passionate about outside of TA? This is your time just to say, hey, this is something that I love, not work related.
Um, wow, not work related. Well, I'm passionate about people, which makes me good
Yeah,
at my work, but I'm really passionate about my family. I love to cook. I love to travel. I love theater. I like to go to productions. I really enjoy watching my daughter dance. She's a competitive dancer, so I enjoy that. I enjoy watching my son play baseball. Like basically, I think anything my kids do is
yeah,
amazing. My oldest daughter competes in Odyssey of the Minds. I think that's really cool. I just really, enjoy getting to spend time with them. And one of my favorite things is just cooking dinner at night
yeah,
because my kids get involved. My kids all like to cook, and I just enjoy spending time doing that.
yeah.
So
Awesome. Well,
yeah,
Jessica, thank you so much for coming on the video today. I appreciate all your insights and great conversation. So thank you so
yeah.
much.
Thank you so much.